There are 6 philosophical systems in India, and Vedanta happens to be one of the 6 philosophical systems. Now, further, the Vedanta philosophy has 3 branches. One is, of course, Advaita Vedanta, or the concept of non dualism, propounded by the great 8th century saint Shankara. Then we have the concept of Visisht Advaita, or the qualified non-dualism. This concept was propounded by the 11th century saint Ramanuja. Then further, we have the 3rd branch of the Vedanta philosophy. We call it Dvaita, or the concept of dualism. This concept of dualism or Dvaita philosophy was propounded by the great 13th century saint Madhava. So we have 3 branches of Vedanta philosophy itself. One is, of course, the first one is non-dualism, or we call it monism. And the second concept is qualified non-dualism, or the Visisht Advaita. And the third is, of course, the concept of dualism. Now, if we try to understand this concept from yoga point of view, and also from spiritual point of view, the implications are somewhat profound, of course, but you will realize in the end that there is actually not much of practical difference between the 3 philosophies. I'll try and give you an insight into how these things exactly work, and I'll try and compare it with the now modern science, and try and reconcile it rather with the modern science, and let's see if it fits the overall bill, or the overall bigger picture. I will also would like to take the help of the ancient Sanskrit texts in order to illustrate this concept a little more in depth. Now, first you see the concept of non-dualism. In a way, it is, or the Advaita Vedanta, it is self-explanatory by the word itself. That means there is no separate identity between the universal soul or the God, call him by whatever name you want, and the individual spirit or the individual soul, or for that matter, a human being. Let me recall in the words of the great sage Swami Vivekananda, if God is like a circle, the circumference is, let's say, nowhere, infinite. In such a situation, we also have that the center is also nowhere. God is like an infinite circle, circumference is infinite, and the center is also infinite. But whereas in case of an individual soul, yes, it is also like that same circle with infinite circumference, but the center is located at the core of the individual soul. That's the only difference. However, from the Advaita point of view, or the concept of non-dualism, there can't be 2 gods. There can't be 2 spirits. Whether it is a universal soul, whether it is an individual soul, it got to be one only. It is just that temporarily the individual soul may be under the cosmic illusion, or we call it Maya. So, till the time it realizes its own divine nature and merges with the universal soul, this distinction may exist, but theoretically, at the fundamental level, I repeat, at the fundamental level, as per Shankara, there is no such concept known as dualism. It is only non-dualism. Now coming to the concept of qualified dualism, in a way, Ramanuja propounds the theory of this Visishta Advaita, or the qualified non-dualism. But in order for you to understand it little better, let me first go over to the concept of what's dualism all about, as propounded by Madhava. But then the concept of dualism has arisen 200 years later, approximately, after Ramanuja has propounded the concept of qualified non-dualism. So there is a time difference of about 200 years. They were not contemporaries. So dualism, when the concept is there, it is also self-explanatory, as you all can give a wild guess what I am going to speak. The proponents of dualism say that the individual soul and the universal soul can never be same. Eternally, the devotee is as a different identity apart from the God. So now this is the concept of dualism, and there have been many religions also which have been developed based on this concept of dualism. If you see one of the branch of Hinduism, the followers of Vishnu, Vaishnavites as we call it, they believe in the concept of dualism. It is more or less akin to, in probably what I understand, is akin to Christianity also, Christian teachings also. So we have two pillars of this philosophy. One is non-dualism and dualism. In non-dualism, the belief is that there is no difference between the individual soul and the universal soul. They got to be only one. And in case of the concept of dualism, based on which a few religions have arisen, the individual soul and the universal soul, they are always eternally separate. So these are very profound philosophies which you need to understand. The entire concept of Shakta philosophy in India, or the worshippers of the God in the form of cosmic power, or the energy worshippers as you call it, they are aligned more towards the concept of Advaita Vedanta, or the concept of non-dualism. Now when it comes to the followers of Vaishnavism or Shaivism in India, generally, or even for that matter, a few other religions like Christianity, they draw their strength from the concept of dualism or the Dvaita Vedanta. Now here is the important thing to understand pertaining to what is the middle path, the qualified non-dualism. Frankly speaking, my knowledge of the qualified non-dualism is not much, or rather, I have never read the teachings of Ramanuja. But as a yoga practitioner, if I try to apply my mind and see probably what he must be hinting at, I personally feel that my thought process is more aligned to the great 11th century saint Ramanuja. He was more of a social reformer, in the sense, in good olden days, the Hindu temples were not open to all castes. They were only upper castes were allowed to enter into the temples. So Ramanuja has supported the idea that everyone is entitled to worship of the God, Therefore, he advocated for the opening up of temples for all castes, all people. So he was more of a, he fought for the equal civil rights of the people. Apart from that, yes, he was also a strong worship, he followed the path of devotion. But here is a little bit of contradiction. The contradiction here is, on one side, he was following more like the concept of dualism. When he was following the path of devotion, you basically follow the concept of dualism. When it comes to the concept of non-dualism, it is more, you can say that, abstract in the sense. It is not specific. Now, if we try to reconcile what that thing which he must have been probably trying to hint, the Saint Ramanuja, is like this. See, every individual soul is trapped inside the cycle of birth and death. Now, what happens to the individual soul after it is liberated from the cycle of eternal birth and death? And I'm talking of the timelines which are gigantic. It's not ordinary timelines, because the soul must have taken birth so many millions and millions of times. It must have undergone through so many cycles of birth and death, and finally now it is getting liberated. Now, what happens to this individual soul after it is liberated? Well, the problem here is no one has ever come back to tell the story. No one has ever come back to tell the story. Of course, I don't want to comment on great incarnations of the God who incarnated on this planet in the form of a few gentlemen like Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, and various other incarnations. I don't want to comment on them, because technically, from yoga point of view, it is not, they shouldn't be taking birth. It shouldn't be possible to take birth in a human form in such a high spiritual state. But how they manage to take birth as human beings, or how they manage to incarnate as human beings, is a mysterious thing. So hence, I would like to refrain from making any comments on them. Now, coming to our story of what happens to the individual soul after it is liberated from the cycle of birth and death. First of all, as we all understand from the ancient Sanskrit texts, yoga comes to an end effectively. The moment mind stops undergoing through any more further modifications, which is possible when only all karma has been exhausted, it is now in a state of thoughtlessness. In such a state, the soul quits the body, just like a car comes to a halt the moment the fuel is exhausted. So the soul stops taking birth again and again, because there is no karmic fuel left. But is it merged with this universal soul now? Now that is a big question. Even this, as per the Sanskrit text, only yoga comes to an end, which means mind stops taking any modifications. But then a thin layer of, call it a sheath, call it as the sheath of bliss, it still exists around the individual soul, even after it has managed to liberate from the cycle of birth and death. Now that we call it as the casual body, or the seed body. That means it has the potential to spring back into Maya, can be thrown back into Maya anytime. Potential is there. It may not be taking birth into any womb, because the karmic fuel is no longer there, but potentially it can be thrown back by God into the cycle of birth and death once again. At least theoretically it is possible. That's why we call it as casual body or the seed body, or in Sanskrit we call it as Karana Sharira. Now what happens to this individual soul after this? It continues to remain in its subtle body, sorry, not subtle body, casual body now, because it has managed to quit the gross physical body and it has managed to quit the subtle body. But the casual body still is intact. Now, as per the Sanskrit yoga text, it is said that now the soul itself does the yoga practice in the form of Shambhu or Lord Shiva. That's what we call it. They refer to as Shambhavopai, or the concept technique of Shambhavi. And it takes again millions and millions and millions, probably God knows how long, ages, for the spiritual development of the individual soul. Now, in the meantime, what happens to the individual soul? Now, well, we do have certain indicators from the ancient texts, although, as I said, no one has ever come back to tell the story as to what happens to exactly. Now, the indicators point out that the individual souls, as they grow up spiritually, as they advance in their spiritual level, they may assume different celestial forms, or the bodies of celestial, or the forms of celestial bodies. Maybe some souls may become comets, some may become planets, some may become stars, and some may take the form of 5 elements on a particular planet, like the wind god, the fire god, etc. So if that be the case, now see, when we now here I would like to again take the help of Sanskrit text once again for the sake of illustration only. In Hinduism, they say that we belong to one Brahmand, or the egg of Brahma, or the one world system. When we say one world system or one Brahmand or God as our creator, here certain things need to be nailed first. They need to be defined. What do you mean by Brahmand? What do you mean by one world system? Mind you, if you see the ancient Sanskrit scriptures, one world system got to be consisting of, if not more, at least the planets and the 5 elements, and of course the typical one heaven and one hell, and various other planes of existence. Now, do we mean to say that if we try to compare it with the modern known astronomy, if we, let's say, compare it, the one Brahmand or the one world system with our solar system, it more or less seems to fit the bill. If we assume our solar system as one Brahmand,